episode 25 of Strange Brow Radio. I'm your host, Tobe Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Today's episode is investigator, witness, and engineer Scott Taylor. This is going to be a Sasquatch-laced back and forth conversation with Scott and I. After I delivered him a wood watcher, I'll tell you more about what a wood watcher is later, but first, do you know about Feral by Aaron at Etsy.com? And if you don't, you should. Why, they are our sponsor. Along with Marcia K. Moore, the artist from Ancient Aliens that worked on the Guardians of the Badland Ground Earth pictograph. Long story short, brilliant stuff at Etsy at Feral by Aaron at Etsy.com, ERYN. Shaman-inspired drums, rattles, and smudge fans. And I will have one of the pieces at our Secrets of the Sasquatch meeting. I'll tell you more about that. But first, let's get into Scott Taylor. We'll be right back. As I said, Scott Taylor is our guest today. Scott, engineer by trade, Bigfoot investigator, researcher, at night. Also during the day, probably the weekends, much like all of us, if you're interested in the subject matter. He had his first encounter back in 2005. It was an unelicited encounter from, we'll say, northern Washington. And he'll get into all that. And then he quickly fell down the rabbit hole. And as we've discussed here before, it just depends how deep you want to go down this rabbit hole. And we go really deep. So prepare yourself, because we are up against the clock. 5 days to the Secrets of the Sasquatch at the Axe and Fiddle in Cottage Grove, Oregon on July 13th. And I thought Scott would be an important voice to kind of set the tone before this conference. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's hear from Scott Taylor and his own secrets of the Sasquatch. Well, we are here with Scott Taylor. We're at his house right now. I just dropped off a wood watcher for him and Susan, and we are inside the living room here, and Scott and I are just catching up. I'm having a nice cup of coffee here since it's Strange Brow. We're having a strong brew in a Sasquatch mug. And so, Scott, you just got back from your getaway cabin, you and Susan's little getaway. Tell me a little bit about how you chose this cabin that you just got back from.
So we decided that down the road, when I retire, we're going to want to live out in the woods somewhere. We want to live where we have Sasquatches around us, because we'd like to have a campfire and have them come just sit right in and chatter with us across the campfire if they want to, and build that kind of relationship with them.
Yeah.
And so we found this little property out west of Shelton, and so it had a nice house on it, a pump house, and we've done some improvements, and it's a work in progress, but we've been having Sasquatch activity ever since we planted 4 fruit trees. That was the thing that got their first attention.
So you did that with purpose. You must have thought, okay, eventually these things will want natural food to come for. So what did you plant? What did you end up? What kind of fruit trees?
So we planted 2 apple trees and 2 cherry trees. I think that the idea of planting trees and caring for your property and the wildlife and the trees and the things that are there, I think that resonates with them. And the fruit trees that's a food source down the road, and I think they appreciated that. The way we found out was we had constructed a glyph, and it was some sticks arranged in the shape of a fish, kind of.
Okay.
And we put some rocks, some little pebbles in there, arranged them a certain way, and we'd take a picture, and then we'd go away for the week, and we'd come back and see what had changed. And nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened until we planted those trees.
Oh, really?
And then we came back and they had added a rock, and it's too big a rock for a squirrel to carry or a bird to carry. It had to be something that had some hands to build, take this rock from somewhere else and put it in the middle of that glyph.
Well, okay, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but I want to talk about this glyph in the shape of a fish. Are you talking like I would see on a bumper sticker?
Yeah, kind of like. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
Is that an acknowledgement of faith, you think, for you? Did you take it that
Yeah, I
way?
kind of took it that way
Right.
also, yeah.
Okay.
And that's kind of why I chose that at first.
Right.
You know, we tried other shapes too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I got you. Now I'm going back to the story. You left the glyph.
We left the
They
glyph.
put the rock in the middle there
Yeah.
as an acknowledgement,
Yeah,
maybe, of
they
like,
added
okay,
it.
we get
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's an ancient sign that Christians would do with their feet to hide the fact that they were Christians from being persecuted.
They would draw an X,
Right.
and then if the person that they were talking to knew what they were talking about, they would draw the front part of the fish, which should be a sideways V.
Right. Okay. Oh, I got you. Okay. I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah. That was the code of acknowledgement between Christians that had to be hiding out.
We're jumping right into the thick of it here because I want to get into not only faith as it pertains to this, or Christians or any other religion, but maybe Christian, because I think there might be a link, especially with Matt Johnson's case, where he talks a little bit about that. But and where you're at with this here, as far as like the attachment theory, that there's linked to the Nephilim, fallen angel scenarios, or what exactly your view is. But before we get there, let's go back. Let's go way back to not only your first encounter, but like childhood. Like when you were growing up, Scott, where was this on your radar?
Nowhere.
As far as nowhere, because you're a schooled individual. You're an engineer in mind.
I have an engineering degree. Yes.
Right, so your mind is geared towards hardwired facts. This
Yeah.
doesn't exist in that realm. I mean, really, it's hard to put it in the hard line equation realm. So how did you get there slowly, or did it happen quickly?
It happened pretty quickly on my first encounter. Going back a little before that is while working at Boeing as a tool engineer, I had friends there, and you know, the guys that like to hunt and be out in the outdoors, you know, they gravitate towards each other, and we you know, share stories and that kind of thing. And I had one friend that lived over in the Purdy area.
Okay.
And he liked to elk hunt over on the east side of the Olympics. And he and his family would go out there and they'd stay for a week and, you know, put up a camp and they'd hunt. And one day, was actually opening day, he was walking uphill up a ridge line, and he finds in the snow these great big footprints, you know, human-looking footprints. And so he starts following them. Well, he caught up to it because evidently it wasn't going very fast, but he caught up to it, and he sees this gigantic butt in front of him because it was, you know, kind of stooped over and going uphill, maybe even on hands and knees. And the thing stood up, turned around, glared at him, you know, showed its teeth, and growled at him and scared him so bad that he ran all the way down the hill. And he spent the whole week in camp. He wouldn't come out of camp. He was so scared. So he told me that story, and at that point I hadn't seen one, had no experience. But then I found a newspaper article that had the picture. It was a Cliff Crook, I believe is his name.
We're standing in the swamp, looking up at the camera.
Looking up.
Right.
And it was in color, and so I thought that was a great picture. If that's a real one, that's a great picture. And I didn't know if it was real or not. But anyway, I cut that out, and I took it to work, and I kind of approached this guy, and we were standing at a workbench kind of thing, and I said, I got something I want to show you, and I want to get your gut reaction to it. And he goes, oh, okay. And this is a guy that everybody knew. No matter what, he would tell you the truth. He was not a fibber. He didn't play jokes. You know, he was just straight up honest guy. And so I just flipped that photo out in front of him, and a guy's knees buckled, and he had to catch himself because the emotional impact of seeing what he had seen before, seeing that picture, it took him by surprise, and he had this unmistakable reaction to that picture. And I thought, yeah, that's what he saw. He really did see one. So now I know, because I know him, okay, they're real, they're out there, but I've never seen one, so still had a little bit of agnostic, a view of it, But then when I had my own encounter, it really drove it home that they're real, and turned your whole worldview upside down, because now there's this great big, my thinking at the time, there's this great big monster out there that we're so small compared to them. We're defenseless, and they could do anything to us that they wanted to, whenever they wanted to, and there's nothing we could do about it. And the rifle I held in my hand seemed awful puny and pretty much useless. So it's definitely very upsetting. So
unknowingly, you have your first really interview with a guy that has, a fresh encounter in his mind, at least. And this will come into play just like it did with you this week when you ended up talking to someone. So is that when you did you grow fascinated with getting to know people, kind of like I did, that had encounters and then sought them out?
Not really until after I had my first encounter. And then I went to work that Monday morning. I had it on Saturday, and I went into work on Monday morning, and I was blabbing to everybody about the whole thing. And, I got a mixture of reactions from people, all the way from laughter to, that's interesting. And then a few, over the next week, people would come up to me privately, and they would say, well, let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what I saw. And I found out I had about a half a dozen coworkers who had close-up encounters with them. And so that validated my encounter, because it was much the same as theirs. And then my coping mechanism was to learn as much as I could. So, at lunch break, I'm on the internet looking up stories and finding websites and reading up on as much as I can to figure out, what's going on with it, listening to clips of the Sierra sounds and searching for pictures and videos, which there isn't much, that's believable anyway.
But enough to keep
Not
your
enough,
mind going. Yeah.
And then I thought, you know what, this is crazy. It's kind of it's overwhelming me, and so I thought, I think I'm gonna go on one of those BFRO expeditions and see if I can't get some real answers to this. And so I did, and that's kind of where it all started for me.
And what year was that?
That was 2006, August 2006, and
Okay.
we went up in the Cascades. And
So your first real attempt at pushing to have an experience, 2006, with a bit large group, small group?
there was about 35 people there.
Yeah, pretty large.
But it was so fun, because I come into camp. As a matter of fact, I didn't know where the camp was. I thought I knew, and so I parked out on the road, and then I'm hiking the very dusty dirt road in. I mean, it's that time of year, it's so dusty that your feet are sinking 3 or 4 inches into the dirt. And a guy stopped and picked me up, and he and his wife and drove me into the main base camp. And then once I got acquainted with him, and then I went and got my own vehicle and drove it in. Everybody was so nice, and I met a lot of great people.
This is right at the beginning of BFRO. It has to be 2006.
BFRO started in '96.
Okay.
But they would do expeditions, just 1 or 2 a year, and Matt Moneymaker would generally organize them. And then it became bigger and bigger, and pretty soon people in the different, investigators in the different states are starting to organize them themselves. But this one, Matt Moneymaker came to. So, I'm there, and they told me, gave me a little rundown, Sasquatch 101. Colonel Kevin Jones did that, really good. And I got my camp set up, kind of teamed up with another guy, John Ray, it was his first time too, so we were the newbies, a couple of the newbies anyway, but they're introducing me to people that I didn't know who they were, but it turned out they were, pretty important people.
They would come to be kind of known.
They would, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mel Scahan, he brought his best buddy Bob Gimlin. And I didn't know who
I've
the
heard
heck,
of that guy.
I didn't know who the heck Mel was, but I did know who Bob Gimlin was, and it's, my gosh, we get
Right.
to listen to the whole story. We sat in a big circle, all of us, and Bob Gimlin talked for about 3 hours, and he told us details that we'd never read anywhere.
And this is before Bob really started hitting the public circuit. I mean, he was still kind of in the background.
Kind of at the beginning of
Yeah.
it, yeah. He was getting validation from his friends who were in the BFRO.
Right.
And who were going all the time because they were supporting him, and he was actually able to have more encounters. Not that he had any more eyeball sightings, but he stood out and on a road and yelled at one that was yelling at him, and he tells that with fond memory. But
Okay, now earlier I alluded going back to your childhood. I still want to go back there before we get into your encounter because I know people want to hear about that. I want to hear about that. But, I remember walking through the library and seeing the different books on the shelf, and Bigfoot was always smack dab between ESP and Loch Ness Monster and vampires.
Oh, yeah.
It was in the paranormal shelf, the New Age shelf, right? The mystical shelf, black magic, Bigfoot, whatever. It was all right there. It's still there. It hadn't changed. It's still in that category. So my frame of reference was that this is probably something connected to that realm, just as a young man. But here you are, wired for science. You had no fascination to go to those areas on the bookshelf, or what were you into as a kid?
Oh, I was into just being a kid, hunting and fishing.
Outdoorsy guy?
Outdoorsy stuff.
Go hunting with your dad? Go fishing?
My grandpa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was out of the picture, but when the family moved back to Oregon, which is where our family is from, my mom moved us back to be near her parents, and Grandpa was a fisherman's fisherman, and he loved to hunt deer, and so
What area of the country is this?
they were in Corvallis.
Oh, really? My neck of the woods. Okay.
Yeah.
Corvallis.
And
All right.
he was a pastor of a church there.
Okay.
Nazarene church. And then by the time we moved up there, he had been transferred up to a church in a little town called Grand Ronde, which is between McMinnville and Lincoln City, right in the Coast Range there. It's a Indian agency town. And but I mean, it was an awesome place for kids to grow up because you could just run and play. There was like 2 rivers going through there. You could go down there, go fishing anytime you want, wade the rivers, swim the rivers.
Right.
There was mountains around. You could just run and just be kids. Plus, just north of there, a few miles, was a place called Spirit Mountain.
So this is what I was, Spirit Casino, Spirit Mountain, totally squatchy area.
Very squatchy.
Yeah.
Only I didn't have any clue about any of that
Right.
kind of stuff. So
But religious. Your grandfather's, you say, a pastor?
he was a pastor, yeah.
Yeah, so you grew up in a strong, old-fashioned...
Oh, yeah. Church
Protestant,
on Sunday,
yeah.
church on Sunday night, and church on Wednesday.
So where were they with things as far as like magic or the paranormal? How were you brought up to actually think of things like that?
We were probably just brought up that if it was in the Bible, that's all there was.
Right.
Be frank, I was too young for it to
You're good.
to really influence me that much. It was like, okay, well, you went to Sunday school and you learned all the things they teach you there. And it wasn't until later in life where I learned more about what the Bible really said, and was reading it for myself, all the way through, teaching Sunday school, and that kind of thing. But it talks in the Bible about spirits, beings that you can't see, odd things that would happen, and angels and a lot of things that people maybe experienced at that time were the same things that people are experiencing today, and some of it kind of Sasquatch related, but we do very much Sasquatching for very long, and you're going to start running into things you can't explain. that
Yeah.
are not the touchy-feely kind of, flesh and blood kind of things that people expect. And you find out that there's more things out there in the dark when you're on night walks than just Sasquatches.
So running around in a squatchy area like that, you never had, looking back, you never, no rock throwing, no stories,
No.
just like you don't go to that section of the
Well,
woods.
that was actually before the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Okay.
So it wasn't really that well known outside of
Not
Northern
even by the
California.
natives there on the land, or I mean,
Well, they didn't talk to us.
No.
No.
You didn't have any native friends.
No,
No.
they didn't talk to us.
Okay.
I mean, I knew a few guys that were native, but my grandma kept saying, "Stay away from them."
Okay. And their grandmother was saying the same thing too.
Probably,
right.
yeah.
Stay away from that guy.
Yeah.
They're not saying that anymore, though. They're saying get close to Scott.
But I've since talked to several people who had encounters down there who were native, and they had filed reports.
Oh, really?
And I because of it being there, I picked up on those and went, oh, I got to call this guy, and had some interesting conversations.
So you grew up in a relatively normal, all-American home. You brought up my grandparents basically brought me up kind of in the same tradition as you were brought up by a single mother. But just looking back, there really was no room for any real foundation of there being, and this is what I'm getting at here, as far as like having a religious background, there was no real deep thinking to it. It was just like, this is our cultural religious upbringing, and this is kind of what will happen, and we'll either be middle of the road or kind of slackers in some areas of it. But as far as like real deep fundamental thinking, it never was really required. Was that required in your house at all to really think through your spiritual faith?
No.
Okay.
No, not really. My grandfather on my mother's side was a pastor until he retired. My grandfather on my father's side was a pastor.
Okay.
And actually, it's through that connection that my father and my mother met each other.
Yeah.
So the whole world, their whole world was steeped in their faith and their teachings. Us kids were just kids. I mean, we were young, really young. 9, 10 years old. And then later we moved away from there, moved up to the Hillsboro, Forest Grove area, and I went to Forest Grove High School, grade school in the town of Cornelius. And by then we were boys that had gone hunter education, and we were out hunting, every weekend of deer season, and all that. And after I had my first encounter in 2007 and smelled the smell, that real strong Sasquatch smell, my memory started coming back as to how many times I had smelled that smell in the Oregon Coast Range while hunting, hiking, shooting, fishing, doing all those things that teenagers do, and how many times that they had been close by me and I never knew it, because to smell them like that, they're pretty close.
Okay.
So they had been around me the whole time, and I just never knew it. And I don't know, maybe they're keeping an eye on me. I don't know. I have dealt with a number of witnesses who seemed like they were tagged, and they had memories
tagged or marked or
something.
Right.
And they had memories of being taken by hairy people when they were toddlers, and taken all out, out of their window, and then brought back before morning. And they've had Sasquatch interaction their entire life. And it's like no matter where they went, they were followed or reconnected somehow.
And you still believe that today, that there is kind of a tagging or a mark of individuals, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems, and here's the odd thing with this one woman we were talking to, Susan and I went and interviewed her. Her husband was he was still in the military at the time, and he was kind of aloof. He didn't really want to talk to us. So we ended up talking to her and her mother and her sister, right? And talked for a couple hours and found out a lot about what had happened through their lives. And so this woman had had this connection with Sasquatches her whole life. And then I went back and talked to the husband one-on-one extensively, because they had moved from the place where they were in Olympia, where they had the first encounter that kind of got us there. They moved out to Yelm. And they had more stuff going on
Right.
out there, including one that came and just walked boldly through their yard and made kind of a little loop in front of them. Walked through the yard, kind of turned left, walked back out to the road, and then came back around to where he started. And real good, solid eyeball sighting of this thing. And so I went back, and the husband was home and the kids were there. She was gone, which that was actually good because I could talk to him. And it turned out he'd had interaction since he was a kid, and he grew up in that area, the Yelm area. And outdoorsy kid, hunting and fishing and all that, but he'd been seeing them his whole life. So it was like he was tagged too. So these two tagged people get together.
Let's talk about you getting tagged. Let's go back to 2007, right?
2005.
2005. This is okay. So you
That's
went on
my
the
first encounter.
You went on the expedition after you had your encounter.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah,
Okay, got
yeah.
you.
So
All right,
one
take
of
us through that day.
So one of the odd things about that first encounter is it was so terrifying and world view upsetting, just totally turns your world view on its end. And while I was scared, I felt that there was this strange connection that was made, and it's, why do I want to seek them out? Why do I want to learn more about them? Which is why I started reading everything I could read, and then going on the expeditions, and then becoming an investigator and learning more and more and more. But there's a connection there. And then I find out later that they're all connected to each other. And so when you have a close-up encounter, that connectedness that they have between themselves, I believe, transfers to a human. And we're connected then with them, and it's kind of like forever.
Okay.
So I would never, even though I was afraid of what I encountered that first time, I never want to live in a place where they don't live. It's like my life would not be complete without having them around. It's kind of an odd feeling that you have to experience.
I know
for
exactly
yourself.
what you mean. I mean, it's been a struggle for me too, with the absence of them around as much as they were in Cottage Grove. So I know what you mean. Once you experience this kind of weird cat and mouse relationship, it's like, it's totally different than a sighting, the interaction part. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, over time, you realize that connection is there, and then you kind of try to hope to cultivate it. And that's for me. That's the long-term goal. It's about getting to a place where regular interaction with them is routine, and finding out by sitting there with them, talking to them, what it's all about. Tell me a story, Mr. Bigfoot, kind of a thing.
Right.
Where did you come from? People are telling this story and that story about, your origins and our origins. Tell me what you know, and get them to tell me themselves.
All right. Walk us through 2005.
So that was, it was October 20th, 2005. It was black-tailed deer season in western Washington, and myself and girlfriend at the time went over to the Wynoochee Valley, and there was a place I liked over there. You had to park at the gate and hike in, and it was about a 1.5 mile hike in. And there was this clear cut that a few years old, so the trees were pretty small. The replanted trees were pretty small, but the nice thing was you could see a long ways. And found this great big old growth stump that probably was 5 feet across, and just kind of snuggled back up against that, using it, as like a chair almost, sitting back against it, and just watching the clear cut. And we sat there all day long, and then towards evening, here in Washington State, there's tables about what time shooting hours start and what time shooting hours end. Roughly, it's a half hour before sunset and a half hour after sunset. But I don't know where the reference point of that is, because when the end of shooting time came, it was still light. It was twilight, but you didn't need a flashlight or anything. So we got up and we packed up our stuff and put our packs back together and unloaded our rifles and just started walking out. We had to walk about 50 yards out of the clear cut to the road, and then we started walking the road. And not long after we got to the logging road, I noticed off to the left-hand side was a log, small log, about 10 inches diameter, laying there. And on top of that log were several little piles of stones, stacked about 3 high. And I thought, that's kind of strange. Who's got time to waste stacking stones out here? And didn't think much of it, other than, that's just odd. So we kept walking, and we'd probably walked about maybe 300 yards, and the timber is big. It's second growth timber, but the trees are 4 feet thick. And it was prime for being relogged. Anyway, we're walking along, and off to our left, we're walking north, and so off to our left, the sun is setting, and so you're getting these almost horizontal light rays through the trees. And off to our left, down the hill a little bit, there was a creek down there. We're basically paralleling the creek, and we walked into this wall of stink. It smelled like burning baby diapers, and it was really nasty. And I remember stopping and thinking to myself, who's burning their garbage out here? And I thought, well, no, there's no place to camp out here. This is private timber company land. You're not allowed to camp here. And I looked at my girlfriend, and we didn't say a word, and we just kind of looked around and then just kept on walking. And we walked maybe another half a mile, and we reached basically a T intersection. And we had to turn left there to head out towards the gate. And about 100 yards after that intersection, the road crosses a creek, and there's a big culvert there. On the north side of the road, it's kind of like a pond, and the south side of the road is just like a creek running down. And she said she looked off down in the gloom because it's starting to get dark, and she says, what the blank is that down there? And I heard sticks popping, and there was this hulking thing down in there, kind of swaying back and forth, but I couldn't clearly see what it was. And I just passed it off as maybe it's a bear or something. Let's keep walking. And at this point, I hadn't put 2 and 2 together as to what was going on. And we walked maybe another 200 yards, kind of turned, followed the road that made a curve, and we got out of sight of that place. And evidently, what was down there, that big hulking thing, had walked up onto the road. And it vocalized. And at the first call, it caught my attention, and I told her, hush, be quiet. And we listened. And it called 4 more times, a beautiful, perfect pitch, woohoo, melodious, extremely loud. And my mind's going, thinking about all the animals out there to make sounds, and it wasn't any of those. And so suddenly, everything came together. The smell, the thing, the sounds. I went, that can only be a Sasquatch. Let's get the hell out of here. And we took off walking as quick as we could. But it wasn't scary or anything until that point. We got that realization of what it was. And took off, got to the truck, headed home. I got online. I found, started searching for audio recordings. and I found the Puyallup Scream of 1973, and it was a different call but the same voice. And I've since talked to Jay, who recorded that, and gotten the deeper story behind the Puyallup Scream, which is the real deal, by the way, folks.
Yeah, just YouTube it if you haven't heard it.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail to that than just what you hear on the release recording. A lot more to that story. So,
Has he ever, just real quick as a sidebar, has he ever been properly interviewed? The guy that recorded those screams?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd be interested to talk to him.
Yeah, he'd be a great guy to talk
Yeah.
to. He's got some great...
Is he still local?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I can give you his real name.
Yeah.
Off the record.
Yeah.
But, so, yeah, that cemented in my mind that, yeah, they were real at that point, having that encounter, and that's kind of where it all started for me for real.
Okay. So as far as that day goes, you kind of just wandered into an area where you kind of have a parallel. Was it paralleling you in the creek?
I think it was just going along the same direction we were going. Just happened to be going. Looking back, I suspect that it had probably spent part of the day sitting there watching us, because they
Maybe
like to
stacking
watch.
rocks.
They like to
Yeah,
walk,
right.
to watch people. So
Yeah.
he'd been watching us, and when we started to move, he just was curious about what we were doing and just kind of followed along with us. There was nothing threatening, no bad vibe, you know, nothing at all. We weren't running for our lives or anything like that. You know, it was just a pleasant walk out, and then, you know, we heard the vocalizations and kind of put it all together as to what it
Yeah,
was.
in the area you
And that's when it
described.
really became upsetting.
Wynoochie's totally known for
Oh, yeah.
all of this there, especially one side more than the other, and I won't give that part away, but I imagine you were probably on the right side of Wynoochie to experience that, because I know that there seems to be a dead side to Wynoochie and a live side. Okay, so that was 2005, but nothing that really told you that this belongs on that area of the bookshelf where we earlier described. This was a flesh and blood encounter
It
with
was a real
something that
deal.
was
It was a real thing. out
physical.
there. Yeah.
It showed physical aspects to
Yeah.
it. Okay. And then I met you around 2010, 2011-ish.
Right.
And then I remember you coming out to Camp White Branch.
Yep.
And you opened up your frozen mice, your little tiny
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
leaf-covered mice, which I imagine
Grass.
might still be
They're
somewhere in the
freezer downstairs.
Okay, I know.
Yeah.
I was hoping so. Maybe we can get a visual later. When you broke those mice, and here I am having, you know, I'm a new guy, totally green, and here the second one's all paranormal. That's Matt Johnson showing up for the first time, not even going woo. He didn't go woo till
He was
after
talking about PTSD and
Yeah.
Sasquatch encounters.
that. Right. He was not fully Zorth yet.
Nope.
He went Zorth after this conference via
Yeah.
Tom Powell. But you come along and you break out these mice and describe to people, because for me, this was a real transition point, seeing what you had in your hand, saying, okay, now wait a second. This is a decoration. This is some kind of, deep forethought into crafts. Like there's craftsmanship here, even though it's so weird. But describe to the audience what you have in your freezer.
So I have 10 little gift-wrapped mice, all wrapped up in grass. And they're like little mummies. And it's all tied together with a knot made out of pieces of grass. And they're kind of like all flattened out right now. I've had them in my freezer for, about 10 years.
Yeah.
But
They got almost like it looked like jackets, like little tiny leaf straight jackets on it with little twig belts. Is that right?
Well, they're all completely covered.
Okay.
You had to take one apart to tell what was in it.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't all mice. It was parts of mice, too.
Oh.
Arms and legs and that kind of thing. But those were a gift to the witness that we're still friends with and see several times a year down on the Napa Vine site. And they had been leaving apples in a bag hung about 10 feet up in a tree. and the apples would be taken, but never all of them. They always left some, and the mice were left as an exchange, because the mice were left right where the apples were. And the woman was out there walking the trails with one of her girlfriends who had come over to visit when they found the mice. And the odd thing was, though, the Sasquatch was right there at the time. They didn't see it, but her two dogs, two at the time, she had originally had three, but the two of them that were still alive at that time were not liked by those Sasquatches. And it probably had something to do with their aggression. They were protecting her. And so anyway, the dogs were upset because the Sasquatches were there, and they could detect them. The people weren't cognizant yet that they were there. And she reached down to pat one on the head to reassure it that everything was okay, and happened to put her hand on its head at the same moment a rock aimed right at that dog's head hit her hand. Cut her hand open.
Never heard this story.
Yeah. And so anyway, the girlfriend became, I guess, pretty upset about everything going on. And anyway, they picked up the little mice and put them on a little piece of cardboard and put them in a big Ziploc and put them in their freezer and called me, and I went out there as soon as I could to see them and get them.
And how soon after or before 2011 or 2012 was that you came to Camp White Branch and you collected those mice? Was that a period of years or months that you'd had them?
Probably about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the community kind of knew that you had these, because as far as unique items.
So I put it in the report that I wrote up. It was that BFRO report is pretty long and has a lot of pictures. I don't know if the pictures are still attached or not because they had a server crash. It might have the links, but that was part of it because it was ongoing and it was pretty intense for a while. Now it's all still ongoing, but it's all routine.
Right.
It's just the neighbors.
So we skipped a chunk of time. You have your initial sighting. You start looking up things after 2005, slowly pushing your way into the other witnesses to meet other people, and then you start interviewing.
So after the 2006 expedition, a bunch of us that were new on the expedition started networking and going out and doing stuff just together. And then some of the very experienced BFRO investigators in the state watched what we were doing.
Sasquatch doing a rooster call on his backyard.
They watched what we were doing and they said, "Hey, you want to be an investigator?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So got set up, access to flats, the side that the public can't see, where the reports come into, and then
these are your secret BFRO reports.
This is the 65,000 plus reports that are in there. Yes.
Right.
And I just started pulling reports and following up on them and investigating them and writing the report up of what happened. And some of the first ones were really good ones, and there's good ones in there right now that haven't even been touched. We're around to like 1,000 behind. There's too many coming.
I want to get back to the flats too, even though I've already asked you at Tom Cantrell's deal about the flats. I think it's important to at least address this question one more time because only a few people really know what you're talking about. We're speaking extreme nerd right now, but the flats are basically the precursor to an actual report before an investigation's done, before a write-up's done by BFRO investigator like yourself. There is a place where these reports just rest. And you're saying there's how many?
There's over 65,000 of them.
Just sitting there. I mean,
that's nationwide. That's nationwide.
That have not been actually looked into?
Well, everything that has ever come in to the BFRO website is there. whether it's been investigated
Okay,
or not.
okay,
It's
got
all
you.
still there.
Okay.
That's where the resident data is. What people see published, if they go on the BFRO website and look for reports recently published, those are the ones that have been investigated, written up, and published. But that's only a small fraction of what's in that database.
Okay, well, let's just ask, how many are really weird? And is there a percentage of BFRO, would you get in trouble for saying this, first of all? Is there a percentage of reports that will never make it on the BFRO website because they're just too weird?
Everything that somebody reports is there, as
Okay.
far as I know. There are some that read very strangely that people look at that and they go, I don't want to deal with that. I don't think it's worth dealing with it. Or these people don't sound credible. They sound more crazy, or they sound like hoaxers.
Right.
I mean, kids write reports in there, and you can pick up on that. You know, that they're just a bunch of kids having some fun.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about crazy things doing crazy things that
That's
people
an
really
easy,
don't
yeah,
do.
easy to smell those ones
Yeah.
out, ferret those ones. But the ones that talk about, and this is where let's head down this path here. The ones that talk about the lights in particular, which I think is really the first clue that there's something else going on here.
The lights,
yes.
as in,
The lights in the woods. The lights in the woods.
oh,
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
seeing the lights in the woods, precursor to Bigfoot activity, seems to be the gateway into the other stuff that's about to happen. Would you agree with that?
well, yes, but the people who are submitting reports are just now having, you know, as they submit that report, are just now having the realization that these creatures exist.
Right.
So
They may not
They're-
include.
they don't know anything about what people call the Whoo. So you won't generally see any of that in there. Now, some people have said, well, somebody goes in and they just delete all those reports. I don't know that to be true. I don't think it's true. I think there's a lot of reports that are just never followed up on because maybe they're maybe a little bit that way, but it doesn't make sense for from the standpoint of somebody looking into a report where somebody's actually just seen
Right.
a Bigfoot. Where you find out these other aspects of it, the Woo stuff, is when you have years and years of experience and you have spent a lot of time, like in habituation sites or on expeditions or your own research site, and this weird stuff starts to happen and you experience it for yourself. And then you start running into other people who are experiencing the same kind of things. You start comparing notes and going, there's something to this. But for what the public sends in, it's not any part of that.
Okay.
They
Because
don't know to make that connection.
Gotcha.
They don't
That makes
s-
sense.
yeah.
That makes sense. It's not like
I
they.
mean-
Right. They're not doing a forensic example of the whole day. They're just like, hey, there was a weird smell. I don't know if this is of interest to you, but there was a weird smell over in the Olympic Peninsula. They may have saw the lights or not, but not known to connect the dots.
Right.
It's two different phenomena.
Basically, what people report is they hear something or they see something. That's all.
Okay.
They don't report.
What do they report more? Hear or see?
More here. I hear wood knocks. I hear whoops. I hear chatter. I hear screams. You know, screams can be mistaken. You know, barred owls sound. You know, barred owls can sound like monkeys. Susan and I were watching a barred owl through a thermal, and it was making the monkey calls. That was a refrigerator.
Oh, okay.
It was making the monkey calls.
Wood knock.
And and
That
I
was a
could
fridge
see-
knock.
Yeah, I could see how people could mistake some of that kind of natural sounds for a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But my experience, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of what's in there is legit, is really Bigfoot related. And it's some of it's useful, some of it's not, some of it's, my grandpa had a report or my grandpa had an experience back in 1963 and told us kids about it, and now they're reporting it in the year,
Right.
2017 or something like that. Well, what do you do with that? There's nothing much you can do with that, and there's a lot of that kind of thing in there. So, the really good stuff is the stuff that happened yesterday, and you call them up and find out what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, so the transition point for you, as far as having an initial encounter, now you're researching it, now you're investigating. Are you doing retreats too? Are you like taking out people after 2010, 11? Are you leading teams of BFRO folks?
So, between 2000 and probably, well, when I got into it in 2006 to about 2012, the Washington BFRO group was a big happy bunch. There were probably 20 or 30 people who were actively doing stuff. And then some things happened that kind of destroyed trust amongst people, and you didn't know who you could trust and who you couldn't trust. Some people had some double crosses done to them. We were starting to experience, on the expeditions, we were starting to experience the lights.
And by lights, explain what you mean.
Okay, you're out there camping and everybody's sitting around and in the camp, and all of a sudden you see the tops of the trees light up, like a big flash, and what was that? Or you're seeing little pinpoints of light like an LED flashlight, but they're 40 feet up a tree, and you kind of know where it's at, and then the next morning you get up and you go, no, that was 40 feet up a tree, that wasn't on the hillside. People are seeing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. People were seeing, actually seeing Sasquatches through night vision, good Gen 3 night vision, seeing the Sasquatches standing on the road in front of them, and then seeing the orbs come floating along and fly around people. So we're starting to experience some of that stuff. There's one place we called the Twilight Zone Camp, because people in their tents would have the little blue lights come floating through the fabric of their tent and then out the other side. And just weird stuff going on, hearing strange sounds, like being in the middle of nowhere and hearing what sounds like a car door open and close. So and there's no car there because you had to go through past a gate that's locked and hike in 2 miles to where you're at. There's no car there, but you hear the sound of a car door. Weird stuff like that, metallic banging. And you're out there in the middle of nowhere and going, what is that? So there's lots of weird stuff that starts happening that people start experiencing. So they were comparing notes and talking about it, and there were some people who couldn't take it, and they decided that it was under their authority to persecute those people and shut them up, because they were ruining the scientific reputation of the BFRO.
So but at this point, you're still at Boeing as an engineer.
Yeah.
Is your engineer mind trying to figure out how this is explainable, or is your religious mind trying to figure out how this is supernatural?
Well,
or both?
A little bit of both. But if you think about astronomy and physics and those subjects, even engineering has to do with a lot of computations of how matter behaves, beams, that kind of thing, structures. You can't see it all the time. You get a beam that bends. You can't always see it bend. It's under strain, and you can measure it with a strain gauge, that kind of thing. But there's things going on that is not something you can see, something you can touch, something you can feel, something you can smell, or all of our senses. It's more than that. It's scientific. And you realize there's things going on in the world that are just beyond our normal comprehension. That doesn't mean that they're not there. Quantum physics is beyond most people's normal comprehension, but it's still there. Physicists understand it. The whole idea, I remember as a young man, the whole idea of black holes was theoretical only. Their computations told them that they had to exist, but nobody had proven that they exist. Today, black holes are given. Yeah, black holes are at the center of every galaxy. They're the engine that runs the galaxy. It's a normal thing, but it's something that at one time was theoretical, and people couldn't get their arms around it quite, and now everybody knows it. So there's things like that going on out there in the world that we modern humans are just not really equipped to understand yet, but a little bit of study and
yeah, but Scott, this is contaminating your world of research. A lot of people would see this as like, oh no, I can't see those lights in my Bigfoot area. Even if I can explain them, I don't want to have to explain them. Did you feel like it was kind of down? I've heard this before from other people, especially people that are, mathematically inclined or science inclined. It's like, oh no, I don't want it to be that. Was there a part of you that wanted to ignore it?
No.
Really? You gravitated towards it?
I just accepted it. One of the things that I learned doing Bigfoot research, is you're going to be faced with reports of things that happen, behaviors that happen, events that happen that you can't explain. You've never experienced it. It's really weird. But I was raised to be polite and not put people down, call them crazy or anything. I mean, I thought that's pretty crazy sounding, but I kept that to myself. And what I learned over time was these weird things in time would be explained. You just give it time. Just take that little nugget of information, put it in the back of your mind, remember it, and just go on about your business, go on about your life. Keep researching, and it's going to be validated or not. Proved to not be valid. Most of the time, those weird things people were telling you about were validated.
And would you say that the lights are kind of at the top of that list?
Sure.
Okay. And that's why I brought that up in the beginning with the BFRO flats and whatnot, because that was my first experience. I think it's a lot of people's first experience. But like you said, how are they connected? It's just like, yeah, I saw weird lights, but what do you mean? I had a Bigfoot encounter. It's not even related, right? Oh, well, there's a major sign it is. We're getting a lot of wood knocks around here. Post 4th of July love. Okay, so people are seeing this actively, and then there's this character assassination technique, which is just small men that don't want to deal with it.
Right. They're terribly threatened by the whole idea.
Small women too that don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, people.
Okay.
People in general they are so set in their worldview. They have put Sasquatch, the Sasquatch subject, into a box. They put boundaries with that box, and anything that falls out of their preconceived idea of what that box is has to be discounted.
Because it's a small box, and when I say small, I don't mean small brain. I mean it's a small worldview where it's just like, eesh.
Right. Very narrow.
Yes.
Very narrow. But Sasquatches don't fit in anybody's box.
Like
but
that.
As soon as you close your mind and say, this is what they are, and they are this, and they are no more, well, then you're done learning, because you're not going to accept the things that they're teaching us.
Okay.
And they teach us things by experiencing things that happen doing research with them.
Okay, so the idea that they are teachers of some kind is going to be a big leap for most of the people that are engineer mind, but yet you're an engineer and you're using these words, teach us things.
So really, when you're doing Sasquatch research, we're not doing so much research as we're doing intelligence gathering. We're finding out what people are experiencing and looking at the correlation from place to place and time to time of the same behaviors that happen over and over and over again. So if a person is living up in northern Washington out in a rural area and they're having Sasquatch interaction, you'll see the same behaviors there as somebody who's having interaction down in Southern Oregon. They do the same kinds of things. An example, at a place over in the Wynoochee Valley that we were researching, we were going out there and leaving gifting sites, and we were putting peanut butter, apples, corn, all kinds of goodies out there, put it on a stump out of sight of the road. You really had to know where it was to go, even put stuffed animals, that kind of thing out there. And we went back after a couple of weeks and looked at the site, photographed everything, and the peanut butter jar had a hole punched in the top. And we looked at that and we thought, that's really weird. How did that hole get punched in the top? But then when we looked inside, it looked like it had been pecked by a bird inside. The peanut butter had been, look, that's what I thought, was a bird was sticking his head through the little hole and pecking at the peanut butter, eating the peanut butter. Well, then Matt Johnson was trying the same kind of thing down at his site down by Grants Pass, only he figured it out. They were punching a hole through the top with their thumb or something, and they were taking a stick and putting it through the hole and getting the peanut butter on the stick and then licking the peanut butter off the stick, and that's how they were doing it. So here you have two sites 400 miles apart, same behavior.
Okay.
Doing it the same way.
And this is just like the monkeys do with termites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 And monkey's not a derogatory term. We're just drawing a link. So for the use of the word people, we don't know yet. We're using the word monkey and people synonymous together.
I go to people.
Yes. Okay. So you go to people. You also go to teaching. And now, am I there with those words yet? I don't know. We'll let the car pass. I don't know what we're dealing with. I just don't know. I want to know. I want to know. I want to feel confident like you. I feel like I know now that there's a supernatural link. I don't know why. I don't know if it's all them. But Dr. J does. Mm-hmm. And I've never spoken about him before on the show. But you feel as though eventually his work and his time at SOA, Soya, Waha, Wahoo, all of these sites, Zorth, the whole kit and caboodle, that one day there will be some kind of reckoning where his research will be known to be true. And we brought up an earlier example of how that may be by another witness that kind of verified what you knew. Why do you feel that way?
So, originally when I started into doing Bigfoot research, it was to, early on everybody's wanting to prove it. Well, after a while you've prove it to yourself, and that's good,
Right.
and that's good enough. And then you want to know, who are they? What kind of creature are they? Are they people? Are they an animal? What are they? And you just want to learn, and you want to keep finding out, more and more, and that's why you do it, not to prove anything. But another reason you do it is to help people who are having encounters and who are having trouble dealing with it. By explaining it, you take away a lot of their fears and give them validation and make it all okay. Who have experienced that kind of thing. They're not crazy. So there's that aspect. So you're kind of like a counselor on one side, but at the same time, from all these different people and all these different cases, you're learning new things, and it's like putting a great big million-piece puzzle together, and pretty soon you start to see what the image is on the puzzle, and you get an idea of what they're all about and what they're doing, and it's a lot more than just some big old dumb wood ape out there in the woods.
Yeah. And you're coming up with things, not just aside from other people that are writing books and other researchers. You have your own areas that you're utilizing to add these pieces to the puzzle here. And one of them was the Scrabble piece Can we talk about that?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
Sasquatch Scrabble. So that wasn't
Sasquatch
my
Scrabble
idea.
pieces. Okay,
That-
but I
that-
coined the Taylor technique. I can't call it that? No?
It was not my idea. That
Okay.
was thought up by a witness
Okay.
who was having a lot of interaction, and he was trying all kinds of things.
So it was his idea.
It was his idea.
Okay.
He was doing things like taking a whiteboard and markers, and
Yeah.
he'd draw some pictures, and then he'd leave that out there for them to see if they drew anything. They were doing a lot of work with glyphs, and he had this idea that their glyphs were actually equivalent to ancient Hebrew writing before the Hebrews had an alphabet.
Like Aramaic? Is this
Earlier than that?
okay?
And it seemed like the glyphs that we were seeing, if you took the illustration of the symbol and the meaning of the symbol from, he found a diagram online about ancient Hebrew signs, and there was a correlation. There seemed to be a correlation. The way they were used was in the right context of the meaning of those signs. Example of one glyph, it means a border or boundary. Well, the way they were placed, it was like, yeah, this is your place and this is our place on our side. You know, your side, my side, your side, my side. Anyway, but so he was going down that track, and then he thought, well, let's play Sasquatch Scrabble. So he got his Scrabble tiles out, and he arranged them in A through Z, and left them out there. Well, they rearranged them, and they rearranged them in a way that had meaning, and you could look at it. You know, the brain can look at stuff and see the patterns and kind of pick up on the meaning. You know, you've all seen these things at Facebook and other places where they have phrases that are written with every single word misspelled and numbers for letters and letters upside down, and your mind can still read it and figure out what it says. So anyway, so they rearranged the tiles, and we could kind of get the message. And basically they were saying, we want to speak through you. They used the guy's name. We want to speak through you. So we got that. And so then he says, okay, I'm going to put the tiles back, just like I started, A through Z, all in a row. They rearranged them exactly the same the next night. So, you know, they did it twice, exactly the same.
Now, were they spelling that in this ancient language, and you had to translate it?
No, it was like using the first letter of words. But the way it was arranged, you could get the idea what they were talking about.
So it's phonetic, like you'd have to kind of sound it out?
Almost like that.
Okay. And this is the technique that we used out at the Almoon Lab. And to our surprise, they used letters. I mean, they used numbers as letters because we ran out of letters. And when you bypass the point of ruling out a hoax, when you're past that, like, okay, we're no longer ruling out hoaxes here. We know something fishy's going on.
Right.
And something communicates directly back to you. It becomes personal.
It
because
does.
now you have a dialogue with them.
And that's where it's at. That's what you're trying to get. It's not getting that $1 million picture.
No.
It's having that personal relationship with these beings, whatever they are.
Let's talk about that, because I feel like that's really the turning point of this conversation here. And this will come back again to spirituality and this connection to the others, them. The idea that you can somehow bypass your ego and get away from collecting evidence and proving this to your buddies is a tough one still for me. It's still tough. But I admit it. I openly admit it's tough, and I think that's maybe the turning point to maybe getting rid of it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. But when did you pass that? And what was it? Have you?
It's gradual.
Okay.
It's gradual. And you take a lot of flack along the way. And pretty soon you learn you don't talk to this person because they're going to give you a tough time. and you learn who you can talk to. There are people around who have experienced a lot more than I've experienced and know a lot more than I know. And I'm still learning, and I'll always be learning. They're teaching new things all the time, but it's not about proving that they exist or not. After a while, you know they exist because you've seen them. You know, it's like Bobo says, you're a knower, not a believer. And once you know they exist, well, where do you go with that? And you just go, well, just say, oh, that's all there is. I've proven that they exist. Okay, I'm good. Or do you go, well, okay, now that I know that they exist, I want to know who are they? What are they? What do they do? What abilities do they have? Because you're finding out that they do these strange things like mind speak. A lot of people can't tolerate the idea that telepathy exists. But then you think, well, how do a flock of birds fly in unison? They're not sitting there planning out and making diagrams and all that. They're somehow communicating to each other. How do fish in a school swim in a school in perfect synchronization? Is it they're not planning it out? They're not rationally thinking, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to swim this way for so long, and then we're going to make an abrupt left turn, and we're going to go this way for a little bit, and then we're going to make a right turn and go this way. No, they're all interconnected to each other through some sort of communication that they all just intuitively know. But they are connected to each other. They are communicating, not necessarily with words, but through some mechanism. And, so it's not a thing that is rare out in the world. It's kind of normal. And people that know how to work with dogs say, if you want a dog to get what you want it to do, you got to think in the form of an image. Well, there are people that have been, basically call it almost like a mind probe. They're showing, they see a slideshow of their lives, but it's the Sasquatch doing it and reading their memories. And so they're seeing this slideshow. And I heard about it from a number of different people who did not know each other. And I went, oh, there is something to this, because it's being reported in different places by people who actually experienced it, not by people that said, well, I heard of somebody who experienced. No, I talked to people who actually had it happen. And it was the same thing. And so when it happens in a bunch of different places to independent people, there's something to it. So where are we going with this? You find out that there's a lot more going on than you think.
Do they need a spokesman? I mean, we talked about them communicating ideas through you, and that's what they said to this guy on the Scrabble board. Do they need a spokesperson, and what's their message? I mean, who's the best person to speak on their behalf, and what is the message?
Well, I would say get Dr. J's book.
Okay.
His 50-year journey come full circle.
Okay.
He explains it really well.
So you feel like that's the best spokesperson that we have right now, speaking on their behalf?
Well, they don't need anybody to speak on their behalf. They don't need us for anything.
Okay. But they said they did in the Scrabble piece, right?
Well, they said that they would speak to that individual.
Okay, we want you to...
Yeah, that they would talk to him, because there are some people who get it, and there are some people who don't, and it's like a talent. It's an ability. I found through doing a lot of Bigfooting expeditions and research and report follows up, that there are some people, generally women, who are very sensitive, and they get it. They hear them. Okay? Us guys are pretty darn dense. We just usually, we don't get it very easily. Now, I did hear them tell me once very clearly to put the camera away, which I did. And the woman next to me looked over at me and said, "What did you just hear?" Because there was no voice spoken out loud. And I said, "They told me to put the camera away." And she said, "I heard it too." So the women pick up on it more often than the guys do. I had witnesses, female witnesses, who were reporting really weird stuff when I was first getting into this, and it was some of the woo-woo stuff that I wasn't ready to understand at the time. It took a while, but it was the women who were picking up on this. And, I find out that also that there's people who can see a wider visual spectrum than a normal average person. They can see, some people can see people's auras. To most people, the idea of an aura is like, oh, well, that's impossible. But then we can photograph it. They have ways of photographing, and you can see people's auras. I know my dog can tell my mood by looking at my aura. And when I'm in a bad mood, I don't have to say anything to that dog, and she's hiding, and I'm not doing anything at her at all. It's just I've had a bad day at work, or, the traffic is just setting me off getting home, and I'm just fit to be tied, and I'm fuming. Well, my dog can tell that without a word. They see it somehow. So there's more going on out there than we humans generally can perceive. There's visual things going on there. For example, how do two crows know which one is the boy and which one's the girl? They all look alike to us, right? They're black. They look identical. How do they know? Two mated geese, they're together for life until one dies. They both look the same. How do they tell? How do they know? Well, science has figured out that if you can see the way they see different things than we see. They see differences that we can't see because our eyes are limited and our brain is limited in what we can perceive. They see it differently. So to them it's obvious, but to us it's not. But that doesn't mean it's not real. So I think our human limitations is our biggest impediment to understanding what these things are, because we're not used to seeing things that are on the fringes of our visual spectrum. We're not used to seeing or perceiving communication through, mind speak or telepathy or mental images. We're just not used to that. But there are some people who've gotten it and they're good at it. They've learned how to do it.
Well, I mean, even by you being on this podcast, I mean, you in a way are a conduit for their message. I mean, not specifically or delivering an individual's message, but I mean, you did come on here to talk about them in a way that's very unique. I totally agree with you that there's this unique quality of interacting with people to deliver them some kind of message, but the specifics of what Dr. J says are very different than what anybody else has said. And then he risked a lot by writing so many specifics on there. And it turned a lot of people off, and he knows it. But yet, I'll just say for the record, any guy that travels as far as he traveled to go research an area once a month for days at a time in the snow and ice experience something. And you've been to that place,
Yeah,
and
I've
been
there.
to that place.
Susan and I have been there. They actually did a little work on Susan while we were there.
Work. Okay, so energy work.
Yeah, a little healing
Like Reiki.
going on. My aunt, she went down there. She badgered Dr. J until he took her down there, and she had some very unique experiences working on her leg from the foot to the knee, and
Right.
was right at the edge of what she could tolerate as far as being touched and that kind of thing. But when we went down there, they were there right from the get-go, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, they were cloaked, of course, but you could tell they were there, and you could hear them. You could hear their footsteps. You could hear it when they moved stuff and moved things around and played with the pots and pans and about tripping over their feet as soon as a light came on unexpectedly. It was all fun, but it was all real.
Yes, real, but and this is the point of like being delicate with a man's work, and also taking on the fact that there's an interpretation of a man's work too. And so to have that interpretation from something that loves this cat and mouse game, how do we really gain the trust of the information? Because what better way for me to lead you astray than to tell you a bunch of crap? So how do we verify the source, since they love this cat and mouse game? And that's what I'm really getting at, is just like, since we're so far away from them in so many ways, how do we really trust the source? Not that we want to not that we're asking anyone to prove this, but just between two people that want to know the answer, how do we really, for example, when people are abducted and they want to be called experiencers, it's just like, okay, how do we go from being taken out of your bedroom, and now you're an experiencer? So it's just like, you see what I'm saying? It's just like how you interpret this here.
Well, it's not something that you can measure. It's not something that you can take a picture of. It's something that you have to experience. You experience it once, and that might be an anomaly of some kind. But you experience it over and over again, and there's a pattern to it, and it's repeatable in that way. You may not be able to control it, but there is a pattern to it. Another thing is also knowing the people that you're dealing with, the other people that you're dealing with that are experiencing things.
Right.
I wished I had been able to be down there with Dr. Johnson when the Exodus happened. I wished I could have been there. If I could have got off work and knew he was doing it, he probably would have said, "Come on, let's go." I was close enough to him, close enough to the other people that were involved to know those people and trust those people, that they're honest and that they're reporting what they experienced.
But just to explain to the audience that has no clue what the Exodus is, and they're thinking only of the Old Testament, we're talking about a moment here where a Tesla coil type apparatus released thousands of Sasquatch from another planet.
It held a portal open.
Okay.
And that was their whole agenda behind talking to people all over the world, trying to find somebody who could help them hold the portal open.
Now, this is going to be really hard for the apers to hear.
Yeah.
Because of the polarization of the individual and the work. And I really want to open up my own portal of sorts for apers to cross through. But somehow, but these are huge leaps. I get it. Like, these are really big leaps. But when you get into when you start talking about cloaking, that's a huge leap there. This is a million miles away from cloaking in some respects, but cloaking is a huge leap all in itself.
Right. The first I heard about cloaking was when early on when I was getting into this, and I was reading a lot. I read Tom Powell's book, The Locals, and he recounted an event where a couple of hunters watched one walking down a clear cut, and when the Sasquatch realized that the hunters were there, it cloaked, and they watched it cloak, and then watched this shimmering thing walk away from them. I thought, well, that's very strange. Everything was new to me at that time. But I was just kind of taking it all in, going, okay, so this is what the Bigfooting thing is all about. And, but not necessarily believing it because I had not experienced it. It was just like, that's an odd thing to be reported. I don't know what's up with that. Well, then I saw that myself. And I went, oh, okay, they really do this. And, through personal experience, I know they cloak. No big deal. They know how to do it somehow. But the military is experimenting with this kind of thing. the idea of infrasound. The military's experience is experimenting with that. Non-lethal weapons, area denial weapons through infrasound.
But this is biology, not tech. So how is this happening? I mean, this is super paranormal, supernatural. This is not tech.
So
Is that what you believe?
no, it's what we call paranormal is normal. We just don't understand yet.
Right.
An example: if you took a person from the year 1800 and you took them to Walmart and you approached the front door and the door opened automatically, they'd say, "What kind of sorcery is this?" Because their minds would not allow them to understand how just because your presence approaching that door would make that door go open. They couldn't get that, and it would be mind-blowing to them, and then they wouldn't be able to assimilate what's going on. But to us, it's an everyday experience. We know there's a little radar device up there, and it's sending out signals, and when it gets a return, it says, "Hey, there's somebody there, open the door." Okay. To us, that's like no big deal. But to somebody from 100 years ago or 200 years ago, that would be mind-blowing. That would be sorcery.
Right.
So to them, that would be paranormal, but no, it's normal. They just don't understand. So everything going on in the world is normal. We just don't understand the mechanisms yet. We will someday.
Are you moving closer to understanding something as, well, benign, really, cloaking now compared to everything that you've started to go down this rabbit hole with? How do you think they do something like cloak?
So what they have told Dr. Johnson, is that they're vibrating at a higher frequency state that is at a state that is vibrating too fast for us to see. Similar things happen, though, in our physical world that we're just used to. An airplane propeller. It's not moving, you can see it. When it's moving slow, yeah, you can still kind of see it, but then it reaches a point where it's a complete blur. And then when you're flying that airplane, you're looking through that propeller at the scenery, and it's like it's not there. It's invisible because it's going so fast you can't see it.
But how do they do that? Nothing in nature can do that.
They change the vibratory frequency.
Like a Tibetan monk would say that they could do through meditation, or?
Well, for them, it's just all natural.
So do you believe they're physically there?
Mm-hmm.
We could reach out and touch them.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt Johnson's little dog has run up and put its paws up on one that was cloaked and wagging its tail and all that, and it's interacting with a being that's standing there.
Have you experienced this?
I haven't seen that part of it yet, no. But
No.
I did see one cross a trail in front of me that was definitely cloaked.
So what do you see? The outline? Like
You see a
shimmery
shimmering thing walk by. It's kind of like in the movie Predator.
Right.
It's funny how the movies come up with these things that in reality
part I
turn out to
agree
be
with.
kind of true.
Yeah.
Walked by, and then to drive the point home, it got into a whistling match with us and was little whistling interchange back and forth. That was kind of fun, and then it got bored with us and walked away. And we could hear it. We could hear bipedal footsteps. We could hear the bipedal footsteps as it walked by. But and see the shimmering, and then it walked off into the trees and then started whistling, and then we could hear it walk away, and definitely there.
If people want to get to know the weirder side of Sasquatch, it takes more than a roadside crossing generally. It takes time. It takes
lots of time.
Cultivation. And would you say that getting to know long-term witnesses and kind of ingratiating a friendship with an authentic one, with a long-term witness, they seem to have the really in-depth, supernatural, paranormal stuff is the long-term witness. Would you agree with that?
A lot of the long-term witnesses don't really understand what's going on. Some of them think that their house is haunted. A lot of things that a lot of people report as hauntings may just be Sasquatch people in a cloak state. Don't know. Or there's lots of beings that are out there in that higher vibration state than Sasquatches. You know, there's other things out there that people are seeing. Maybe that's where ghosts are. You know, I don't know for sure. But if you just keep on studying, keep on learning, talking to people, going out a lot, getting a lot of field time in, and there's a lot of time you'll do a lot of work and nothing happens. But then there's a lot of times when lots do happen, and it's kind of ironic on the BFRO expeditions, we're 80-90% hit rate of having interaction on those expeditions. Eyeball sightings and things being thrown at you and rattling around your tent and stomping their feet and vocalizations and then we had one expedition I hosted, we had what I believe was a portal open up, and while nobody saw them walk out, these guys are out there on a night walk, and 4 guys, and all of a sudden the woods light up in this blue-white light that seemed to come from nowhere but was lighting up everywhere. And first they thought maybe a car was coming down the road they were on, but there was no car. That happens, and then as soon as they get their night vision back, all of a sudden they're looking at 6 sets of eyeballs looking at them. And then then that begs the question of, well, what's the eyeballs? Well, that's the eye glow. Well, that's not eye shine like a deer or a dog. When you're shining a light in its eyes, that's a self-luminesce that their eyes do. And it's not coming from the inside of their eye, it's coming from the sclera around the outside of their eye from people, as described by people who've seen it up close, which one of my witnesses saw on multiple occasions up close.
Keep talking.
So they're doing it. These things are actually happening. So you just keep on keeping on with your research and your studying, and you're talking to people and experiencing things and compare notes. Don't just dismiss somebody's experience because it's something you haven't experienced or it sounds really strange. But don't necessarily make a judgment. Don't believe everything you hear, but don't dismiss everything you hear. Just file it away and see what happens down the road. And you'll find out that it'll either be confirmed or it'll be not confirmed, but it'll be resolved one way or another.
With that slit of light in the woods, was there a sound associated, or do you know if there's ever been a sound with a portal opening up?
I've heard that there's a sound.
Have you ever heard it described? 'Cause maybe I
kind
have.
of like, when you're driving down the road and they got the rumple strips along the side of the road to wake you up if you start to go off the road. It kind of sounds like that. Okay. What's been described to me.
Hold that thought here. We're going to play this sound here. This is from 2019 from Cottage Grove, Oregon, and it sounds a little bit like Scott's describing here. This is what we call the stone wheel and frothing chops. Play it one more time here. I guess that's it. But you can hear what sounds like something rolling open. This is a sound that we've caught before at the Al Moon property. And it's something I tell everyone, it makes no sense for this sound to exist where it exists. And then you add in this panting, breathing sound that has no really beginning or end to it. I mean, you don't even hear footsteps with it or the clickety-clack of dog toenails. So as far as portals existing, I'm totally sold. I think we've seen time and time again that there seems to be connection not only with the lights but with portals. So how deep does the rabbit hole go? Does it go all the way into Matt Johnson territory? I don't know yet, but this is something that confirms it for me, working on this case for over a year and a half now. This is something that you've helped me out with along the way too. The measurements of the Al Moon knee prints, we came back at over 1,000 pounds. I think
it was 1,600 pounds, something like that.
Okay, let's talk about those numbers there. So those are big numbers, Scott, and we did them a couple different times. Do you think if you actually had, what would it take to make you more secure about those numbers? Or do you feel like the data that I gave you was enough? Just in short, for the people here, the knee impressions that we've spoken about here came back with a total weight displacement of over 1,500 pounds, 1,600 pounds, which is a very large creature. Very large, very large. What would it take to make those numbers more accurate?
Well, to make those more accurate, you have to have the creature.
That would be the most accurate.
Yeah,
would
kneel down there in it, and then right next to it, in this exact same consistency of soil and moisture and all that.
The same spot.
A person who of known weight, and then it's a simple calculation of depth to weight to area to count for the weight, and it's not a hard calculation to make. So I did it in about 10 minutes sitting there at my desk at work.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big creature. Or is that a lot of weight from a regular sized Sasquatch? Is that a lot of inertia shown from making an impression?
It depends on how hard they hit it, how fast they're going. Are they kneeling down slowly and it's just their weight, or are they, taking a run at it and banging their knees into the dirt? All of that has to do with the calculation, and you don't know those. So you make simplifying assumptions, and you say, okay, well, the way the person did it is the same way whatever made those knee imprints did it. You have to, there's unknowns there. So you make simplifying assumptions. That's what engineers do in order to get their arms around a problem. And it's not an exact science. It's more of an educated calculation. It's kind of like an educated guess, but it's based on doing some math and having some assumptions. It's done all the time.
How tall would something? I mean, how big would something like that be if it were actually 1,600 pounds? What do we know in nature that's 1,600 pounds?
A moose.
Okay, so as big as a moose.
A bear. A Kodiak.
A large
bear.
Kodiak bear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's creatures out there heavy like that.
And Cindy Dosen, who tested the hair, brought us together again. This is how you and I started talking again, is that she said the hair from those knee impressions that we got on Easter Sunday last year matched your hairs. But she didn't say they matched them exactly. She just basically said they're in line with a juvenile Sasquatch hair that Scott Taylor got. And that's why
it all fits, doesn't it? So you got a whole bunch of people doing independent research and coming up with similar results and similar activities or similar happenings, and you compare notes and you go, hey, all this correlates, and that's where the real learning's coming from.
Yeah.
As far as the physical world part of it, and then the other learning is experiencing and learning who they are and what their personalities are and what their names are, and that kind of thing. And that's just a different aspect of it.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We're at an hour and a half here. I really appreciate it. My last two questions here, and then I will let you guys have a life. Do you ever worry that you're looking into something that you shouldn't be?
Well, I know that there are bad entities out there. The Bible tells you that. My Christian upbringing tells me that. You don't want to mess with them. You don't want to invite them into your life. Sasquatches are not that. They're not evil, malevolent, horrible creatures that are going to, take over your life and inhabit you or possess you or anything like that. And how do I know that? Well, just by experience. If they were all that, there would be a whole lot less humans around, because they would be taking care of us and dispatching us pretty easily. And they're not. They're leaving us alone. They're basically wanting to be left alone. But they will interact with people who want to interact with them, and who go seek them out in friendship. You can, over time, develop a relationship with, the individuals that live around where you live. And that's kind of our goal. It's always on their terms, on their speed. But the important thing is that you're paying attention and that you're noting when they are doing stuff. Because most people see the signs and they're really obvious, but they don't see what they are. They don't recognize them for what they are. It's like the extra stone left in our glyph. Or, we're having fun over there right now as we put a pattern of stones on top of a stump, take a picture, and we go back the next weekend and see how it's changed. And we're having a little fun we got a camera on it too, because we want to rule out, is it ravens? Is it squirrels? Is it a person coming along and messing around with it? We're trying to figure out.
Is that possible there? Could it be a person?
They would trip our cameras.
Okay.
And so far, we're not seeing any people. But here's the really odd thing. That camera's on. It takes pictures of us setting it up. We see the rock pattern, and then in the next frame, the rock pattern has changed. I mean, profoundly changed.
Yeah.
And it didn't take a picture of what changed it. So what's going on with that?
But
that's part of the fun.
Right. And this is the part where the apers are going to hear, and I don't mean that as a derogatory term, the people that it's taken that way. First of all, we're called Quantum now. We're not Whoo. We're Quantum. We're cool. We got a much cooler name now. You guys are still apers. No. I mean, the people that haven't really crossed the Rubicon yet have all had this game cam phenomena where they get the inexplicable SD card failure. They get the inexplicable, the weird flashes of light, the pitch put in the camera lens, whatever. I mean, that's a good place to start, don't you think? And that would be my final question to you. Is this like, how do we talk? Because there's a certain portion of this podcast that they're not going to listen to. But I think the game cam stuff and the lights, is safe territory. Game cam stuff probably more. How do we eventually get comfortably those types of individuals to come forward with, I guess the eventuality of what this phenomenon really is this highly supernaturally charged?
Well, it's an energy being. The orbs are them. We can't always see the orbs. Most of the time we can't see the orbs with our eyes because our eyes are limited. Our brains are limited as to what we can see. But the game cameras pick them up. The flying rods, they pick them up. That's different than the moths and the other insects that we see flying around. When you see a flying rod, it's definitely a flying rod. It's not something else. We see the orbs, and we have video cameras out there. We see the orbs come flying around. We know that they're not just mist drops or raindrops or insects because they're maneuvering. They're swinging around the tree trunk and they're maneuvering. Little energy beings of some kind. Almost they fly around like a flock of birds sometimes. There might be, 5 or 10 of them at one time, all come through together. And then somehow someone's rearranging the rock patterns and taking rocks. Now, one of them we had out there had rocks that had carvings on them. One said believe, and the other had a butterfly on it. Those two rocks disappeared. I mean, completely gone. We had a little carving of a bear, right? And the bear is completely gone. And it's not just knocked off the stump and in the brush around, because we've searched all that. They are gone, taken away. Other things left in their place. So you can tell by the before and the after photos that something has been done purposefully. Now, we're putting the camera on it because we want to rule out all the normal things that people would say it would be. Another person, a squirrel, a raven, a crow, the jays, something messing with it. Well, if it's those things, the camera will pick it up. But if it's something else, why is the camera missing it?
So the lack of evidence is the evidence that
Is
it's
the
something
evidence.
else.
That it's something else.
And that's, I mean, is that what to end the conversation here, to close this up in closing? Is that really what you would like to tell the rest of the people that haven't come aboard with these concepts, that the lack of evidence is the evidence, and therefore don't beat your head up against the wall that you're never going to figure it out?
I guess you could put it that way. Sometimes you have to rule out everything else in order to leave the answer. Was it Occam's razor? You know, after you've ruled out everything else, whatever remains, no matter how strange, is probably the truth. I think I probably butchered that, but the concept is there. You rule out other things, and it leaves you to only a few things that it could be.
Well, I have a major announcement that I want to make, but I can't make it yet. But we are going to do Secrets of Sasquatch next year at a really special spot. And I think you're going to like it. And I'll tell you off the record where it's going to be. But I'd love for you to speak next year, because I think that you're investigating the real deal. So I'll talk to you about that. But if you guys are interested in more of this type of conversation, you can go to Axe and Fiddle on the 13th of July, 2019, and show up in Cottage Grove from 3 to 6. It's a free event, and there's more information on that on the website or Facebook. Scott, thank you. I appreciate your time. Any words in closing?
Keep on squatching. Just because you don't get it yet, do it long enough, and this stuff will happen to you.
Okay.
Tom Powell told me that.
Tom Powell.
Tom Powell, and he's right.
And he'll be there. He'll be there with camera crew in tow on the 13th.
That is a treat. Tom Powell is a hoot. I love the guy.
All right. Thanks, Scott. That was Scott Taylor telling you the whole enchilada. I hope you rewind that episode and replay it. There's a lot there. And as I said, it's not going to be everybody's ball of wax. This is a pretty deep rabbit hole we went down, and we know that. But it may be worth your time to re-explore and re-listen to this particular episode. Also, Secrets of the Sasquatch. I mentioned it towards the end. I'm going to mention it again. We're 5 days out. Today is Monday. The event is this Saturday, the 13th of July, 2019, the year of our Lord, 3 to 6, probably more like 3 to 7 or 8 Pacific Standard Time. It's going to be one hell of an event, and I'm going to have some wood watchers there. So what's a wood watcher? A wood watcher is your way to bring Bigfoot home with you, or what I call a wood guardian or a wood watcher. These are carved cedar from the Olympic Peninsula that I did with my own 2 bare hands that are calloused now. And they have interesting attributes attached to them, including these wood watcher eyes. And you hang them out in your favorite spot in the lawn or garden or forest or land, and you let them watch you. I know, it's kind of creepy, but it's kind of fun. Get your own wood watcher. Go to Facebook, look up my name, Tobe Johnson, T-O-B-E Johnson, and I'm going to have some at the event for sale. So if you come, you can walk away with your own wood watcher. Different price points, different sizes, and that's it. No wood watcher website, only Feral by Aaron, Etsy.com, E-T-S-Y, Feral by Aaron, E-R-Y-N, shaman-inspired drums, rattles, and smudge sticks. Make your order today. It's never too early to get your own Feral by Aaron. Okay, that was it. Episode 25. I will see you at the Axe and Fiddle at 657 East Main Street. Free admission. And we've got an incredible lineup, including Tom Powell, which I said, including Ira Wolfnosen, Kirk Sigurdsson, Joe Hauser from the Montana Vortex, Christopher O'Brien from Ancient Aliens and Stalking the Herd, Tom Powell and Ron Moorhead in the same room. Oh my goodness. It's going to be a good time. And Carrie Campbell, Ron's wife, his significant other, is going to be there as well. Maybe some surprises. So show up, don't be scared to go down that rabbit hole. I'll see you at the Axe and Fiddle, and if not, I'll see you in the trees.